simple. You are entitled to great leadership everywhere you go, whether it's to church, whether it's to work, whether it's at your house, you are entitled to great leadership. And so in this podcast, we take leadership principles and theories and turn them into everyday, relatable, and usable advice.
And a quick disclaimer, this show, process, or service by trademark manufacturer, otherwise does not necessarily constitute an implied endorsement of anyone that I employed by or favors them in representation. The views are expressed here in my show are my own expressed and do not necessarily state or reflect those of any employer.
Hey, so welcome back to another episode. We're going to do our first inaugural live lunch and learn. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about Nicholas Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile, Things That Benefit from Disorder. And so I'm going to go ahead and get our panel introduced to you guys today here right away. So our first person up is, I'm having a technical difficulty here in a second. So first up, we have Susan Tobenkin, and she is got so many credentials and letters after her name, and she is the Director of Psychology and Health for the Connecticut National Guard with over 20 years of experience as a licensed clinical social worker. She specializes in holistic behavioral health care and substance abuse treatment. Susan is dedicated to supporting service members with quality mental health care and also serves as a skilled mediator, fostering solutions and complex solutions. So Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And next up, we have Pamela Koppelman. She is the Associate Vice President of Institutional Compliance at Norwich University, a private senior military college. With a 21-year career as a U.S. Army logistics officer and inspector general, she brings a wealth of experience to her role since 2023. Pam views compliance as a positive workforce, enhancing workplace culture, morale, and organizational well-being. So Pam, welcome to the show. And lastly, we have Chris Patton. He has dedicated over 26 years of military service before retiring in 2021. He continues to serve as a civilian inspector general throughout a career built on leadership, accountability, and resilience. They have guided soldiers and leaders through complex challenges while upholding the Army's highest standards. Chris brings a wealth of experience and perspective shaped by decades in the uniform. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here, Chris. And of course, I'm Tim Staten, your host, the podcast creator, Tim Staten, the obvious. If you don't know what I'm about, just kind of check out the channel information, and you'll quickly find out what I am about. So without further delay, I really would like to just dive right into the topic to see if we can go ahead and get to the bottom of what anti-fragile means. So who is up first with wanting to help define what we're talking about with anti-fragile in the context of this book?
So I will jump in first, but first I have to say something that I think I shared with you briefly yesterday. The saying, don't judge a book by its cover, but I did judge the book by the words on the cover because as a compliance professional, sometimes I feel like I need order, I need rules because that's part of my job. But without, getting into all of that, I would say that I was a little misinformed about what the author was trying to describe with anti-fragile. I thought it was basically, you just kind of let things roll off of you. But after our pre-discussion to this lunch and learn today, I, kind of went back and reevaluated what he was trying to say. And it was about it's things and stressors that make you stronger so you don't break as easily. I think Kelly Clarkson said it best with her song Stronger. So I'm just going to end it with that.
I'd follow up and say the same. as an inspector general, we don't have things out of order. We follow rules, regulations. So it was a great read because it opened up my eyes to seeing it from a different perspective. Basically, I think one of my main takeaways is from this book is have a backup, have multiple options. Um, don't ever rely on a single point of failure. That's what I got from that.
So I kind of saw it as both like a practical manual and also like more of his philosophical reflections on things. And it was really pretty profound, I would say, the way he encourages this idea of being afraid of disorder. And instead of seeing disorder as really kind of a fuel or a catalyst for innovation and a more longer term growth mindset, ways to use the uncertainty and push it forward into more active, proactive activities.
Let's briefly talk here for a second about the difference between resiliency and anti-fragile, because he makes a very big distinction in the book between this isn't being a more resilient or more robust, right? And I love his description of like a rock, right? A rock can take a beating. It doesn't get any better from dropping it. It doesn't get any worse. It doesn't change. But much kind of like, I grew up in the South where we had controlled forest burns because of pine trees and forests. If you don't, it grows out of control, then it kind of dies and kills the forest. This fire that you intentionally sets the foundation for new growth and even better and even further nutrition into the soil and into the trees. So when he compares anti-fragility to being able to have some type of negativity towards you and you get better from that versus being resilient, because I think resiliency and resilient has been kind of overplayed. So what are your thoughts?
I'll jump in and say I correlate it because I've been doing a lot more working out now. I correlate it to workout stress. If I'm fragile, I might break. If I'm resilient, I'll recover from the stress. But anti-fragile, I think I'm getting the benefit of the exercise. So that's that's how I look at it. It's like a muscle. I think he speaks about that in the book as well.
Yeah, no, he makes a great point there. You benefit from breaking down your muscles, you rip them, you tear them up, and they build back and they grow stronger. But how do when we tie that to resiliency, though, or we think of that in resiliency, do we think resiliency is still the right word? Do we need resilient people, or do we need more anti-fragile people?
You need both. Again, because I appreciate the ideas and the thoughts from the author. I think I need to digest the book a little bit more in order to fully appreciate everything that, all of the information and the knowledge that he's giving us here. But I think, because he talks about the triad, and you already kind of, talked about it, that I think there's a place in there for everything. And I don't think everything is going to be all in anti-fragile. I think there's a place for things to be in the robust category or the fragile category. And robust was, I think, synonymous with resilient. So I think things may naturally just fall into those, and everything's not going to be necessarily grouped into one area. And I think each circumstance will either require us to be anti-fragile or to be robust or resilient.
So, Sue, what do you think from your experience, with behavioral health and the social work? You see a lot of people at their worst days, and so what do you think?
So I kept every time I was reading, another page, another chapter, another line. I would relate it back to my work here in the Guard. And here, the word resilience, the things related to resilience are kind of, it's used up. It's almost like a punchline from a bad joke, and that the real kind of the Oxford English Dictionary, that real strong definition of what resilience is, I think it's been watered down and polluted and pushed aside. That understanding just isn't there. What it really means to be resilient, to have resiliency, to do that. Just the coming generation, the society in general has kind of made that into something that's just like, yeah, sure, we'll be resilient. And um in my work here, seeing soldiers who are it kind of runs the gamut, right? Some of them really do have some malady. They are, if we could just kind of use the unpsychological term, right, broken, have been damaged. Then there's the other extreme where they're malingerers and they would like to be broken, or they want to put themselves out there as broken. And then there's sort of a category where they may be broken, but they don't want to acknowledge it, and they try to keep pushing forward. But instead of using some of the resilient aspects of themselves, they just put on blinders and just try to push forward. So I think it's sort of a delicate understanding of what resilience really is, and again, looking at some of the terms that he uses, right? Fragile and robust and anti-fragile. I just keep trying to put that into different places in my work here with the Guard, and how that fits with people in the Guard who are really very, soldiers tend to be, and no disrespect, but very concrete, looking for a plan. How do I go from this point to this point? Like engineers, they've got to figure out how much bridging it's going to take to span from one landmass to the other across a body of water. And when you try to disrupt that and put in these other, maybe, might be, should be, is it shakes the plan. It shakes that resilience.
Okay, so Pam, from an educational standpoint, what have you seen? Because it's generational too. I think, I think a lot of older generations, they have resiliency down packed, to a point, to anti-fragility down, and then it's the younger generations where we've tried to overprotect too much. And I know Taleb mentions that in the book, that overprotection also leads to fragility and less resiliency. So what do you?
So I could apply this in higher education or even with my own children, where I try not to be so overprotective or innovative. But I would say, like, in higher education, we see these young adults coming into higher education, and they don't always have the tools or the skills necessary to navigate an adult life, and they are still heavily reliant on their parents, and I'm not just saying financially, but just like mentally and emotionally, and where they should be, because their family provides that support network, but they don't have, their first instinct may to be to call their parents rather than trying to seek the answers to whatever stressor it is that they may be having here, on campus. And like I said, I would say the same for my children, is I have to kind of push them to kind of think for themselves. And so I would say that it's the current environment is a product of probably my generation. And, because we didn't want to expose our children to the things that we had to endure, not realizing that it was going to put them in this more fragile state.
Anybody else think anything different?
I mean, I just have to echo what you're saying. I see the same thing with young soldiers who are at the same spot, and uh, um, a lot of times they look to their superiors as the guide, right? The fill-in dad or mom or whatever, and they end up not thinking things all the way through. Somebody, they're doing, physical training, somebody, hurts their back or something, and the platoon sergeant says, well, go over to medical and get an ice pack, so the assigned private will run over there, say, I'm supposed to get an ice pack, and the answer is, I don't have one. And then they might run back instead of, thinking it all the way through, right? The dad figure, so to speak, said, go do this. They went, they did it, but the idea, would be, let's get outside of the box and let's ask the next medic, maybe it's in his bag, or let's go into the building, kind of pushing it forward to get what needs to be gotten, as opposed to just kind of, let's do it and then I'll go back and see what, I'm told. I see those kind of things a lot.
So I would like to add, even like in my military career, I saw this more and more as I was leaving. And I still see it in some of the forum in which I participate as a retired officer, where these young officers even, they reach out for what they call mentorship, but what they're looking for is the answer and not a way to help them solve the problem. And we still have a tendency to just provide the answer rather than giving them the tools to solve the problem, to make themselves, um, better, stronger, I guess, anti-fragile, if you will.
Chris, you look like you want to say something.
So I was going to tie it into our job now. So we have individuals that in our organization that come look to us for assistance. I think when it goes to resiliency, I think it teaches them to just, yes, I can handle this, I can accept this, but it doesn't give them that extra push to say, okay, I need to be anti-fragile because I want to learn from, or I want to help the individuals learn from the mistakes that they're making, or close it off to where, unfortunately, we deal with investigations, inspections, and stuff like that. Instead of us being that ability to be those early risk of like identifiers, to allow everyone in the situation, to allow the leaders to fix these things that these soldiers need assistance with. So I think maybe being resilient isn't teaching us to take that extra step, in my opinion, a little bit further to get to the root cause of the issue that we're experiencing.
So it was interesting that everybody mentioned some type of embracing an error or a failure. And I kind of want to explore that a little bit more, because how do we, either as a culture or a society, because I know everyone's workplace culture is different, everybody's even regional societal culture is different where they're at. And so how do we embrace changes and helping people overcome them? Like, I believe in letting people fail at something, and not at the extent that it's going to be detrimental, but at the extent of, pain is a good teacher. And how do we set that up and systems up so we can let people fail, but fail forward and be more beneficial? Or do you think that we don't do that at all? Or do you think we do that?
I got one for this one. I agree with you. I think some failure is good. In our culture, I think we would have to get past the part of punishing the failure. Embracing it, embrace the failure, extrapolate the data that comes from the failure. Everything that led up to the failure, everything that happened after the failure, go to that point of origin, identify that, then people would be less, I guess, upset or less scared to fail. And then they can grow. Every failure allows us to grow. And maybe it's just the dynamic of leadership not being so harsh on the individuals when they do fail. What do y'all think?
So as you were talking, I was kind of thinking it, along a similar line. I think that there needs to be that acceptance, right? We understand there needs to be an acceptance from leadership, from someone who has that responsibility position. But I think that's, an arrow that points both ways, right? The person who has failed needs to somewhat take responsibility for that failure as well. I did it, it didn't work out, I was trying this, and if there are consequences for that, to be accepting of that. But on the other end of that arrow, I think leadership has to be willing to say, to hear that, to hear, yes, I've made this approach, I've done this thing, I took this approach, I took the responsibility and went through with it, and it was a mess, it didn't work out. To be able to say, I hear you, I understand what you tried to do, it's good that you came forward and took that responsibility and said, yes, I did it, okay, now we got to fix it. So if they want to kind of, whatever, let out the outburst of, why did you this, that, or the other thing, to kind of pull that back as the leadership and say, yeah, okay, you said you're sorry, or however you want to phrase it, now let's fix it.
Yeah, so I would like to add, so what I heard Chris talking about was root cause analysis, and not just addressing the symptoms. And the author does touch on that in the book about, like in over intervention. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. But I think it's not oftentimes we think of it as a sink or swim, and it shouldn't be a sink or swim. It's, you can guide them to the water, maybe nudge them in, but you provide, a safety net or that support. So that way they know that you're there. And then if they do start floundering, help them. Don't just sit by and watch the person fail. Because that can be detrimental to their progression in whatever it is that they're trying to do. And then you're kind of defeating the whole purpose of making them stronger.
So I would offer up, though, that Taleb also talks about warning against over intervention. So what is that balance between the right level of intervention versus over intervention? And for this one, I am thinking of, helicopter parents, right? So people who are always swooping in to save their kids for everything, or even the bulldozer parents, right? People who are willing to just overwrite every decision that their kids make, whether they're wrong or not, to get their way because they got to help their kids. I think that is not good. And does it develop anti-fragility or resilience in any way other than codependence on parents? So what is that right level of intervention?
Hey, so when we figure it out, we might become very rich individuals. I don't know if there's a right answer. I was like, it's a delicate balance, whatever that means.
It's a scale. It really is. It's how much hands-on, how much how long to be a helicopter parent. It's not saying it's bad to do it, but you're right. Where is that level to where you just got to land the helicopter, let the kids get out and go about themselves? So that is a hard balance to figure out.
So I sort of think about it this way, and we have a mountain unit. The infantry is mountain, right? And they go to mountain school, and you see guys before they're going to mountain school, they've got a length of rope that's 16, 18 inches long, and they're always trying to tie knots in practice and stuff like that. But the point I'm trying to make in a long-winded way is the idea of belay, right? So there's always somebody on the ground that kind of holds the safety part. You're supposed to do the climbing. They're not going to pull you up, and they're not going to, pull you down. They're just going to hang on to that line. And I guess there needs to be some, when I put that sort of a metaphor, that image, there has to be some decision about if the parent is doing the belay part, when do you pull on it so they don't crash to the bottom of the ravine, right? When is it acceptable to allow them to slip? And maybe, you need to let them slip down a larger amount, depending on what it is, before you kind of pull on that safety rope.
That's a great
Tim, I
point.
want to circle back real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, like Ms. Sue said, we do have to, as parents, and this is where I think it gets hard, because every individual parent is going to have their own helicopter, be on belay. But ultimately, I think everyone would agree that all kids deserve some level of setback, some level of failure. Because if we don't let them get to that failure, they'll always be fragile. And I don't think they'll be able to develop, per se, the resiliency or learn to be anti-fragile. So that's, I don't know. It's just my 6 amount.
Those are all great points and valid points of discussion. There's no right answer to these, because everyone has a varying degree of experience and what they view as acceptable. I love the analogy of the belay of, how far are you going to let somebody, fall before you catch them, and accept different levels of risk and everything with that. So I love that analogy too. So thank you for that. When we talk about, letting people fall and having that a little bit of scare, it's really kind of going into hormesis, is what the author talks about. That's where vaccinations come from. So if you're not familiar with the term of hormesis, kings and queens used to do this way back in the day. They would ingest a little bit of poison, not enough to kill you, but enough to make you sick. Your body would attack it, and then you can build up a like immunity to it. That's where we got the vaccination techniques from today. We put a virus in you, whether live, dormant, mRNA, whatever it is. We put it in you. Your body sees it as an outside agency that's not good, attacks it, builds up the antibodies and resistance for it. So in essence, you become stronger through it. So when we have this in place, whether it's at our home when we talk with our kids, but what about at work? How can we kind of use this level of hormesis where we're like, you know what? So it's going to be a little scary. It's going to be a little bit weird, but we're going to get through it, and we're going to get stronger through the end. What are your thoughts on it? Sue, let's start with you.
A lot of times I think that it's stretching the project. A lot of times we look for like the 25% solution. Maybe we need to stretch it to the 75% solution and allow the team to try to, go through that. The other thing is, people oftentimes get stuck in their role, right? I'm the one who talks, and I'm the one who, makes the flow charts, and I'm the one who, does the spreadsheet. And maybe we need to be more cognizant of rotating those things, right? The one who's not used to talking should be out there doing that. They should be changed. And even though the project might not flow as smoothly, that kind of calculating that risk in there, I think, or the idea in my head is that stimulates the growth of all those individuals, and hence the growth of the project in total. And that may lead to the 80% solution or the 90% solution.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would add that again, so just kind of piggybacking off of what Sue said is like, rotating the projects or adding new responsibilities. And, or maybe it's not a full change of a role or something that an individual is doing, but maybe giving them a more complex case, in the IG world, giving a new IG a more complex case, rather than, what is one of the, I can't know, like a pay issue is a pretty simplistic, in the IG world, but, giving them one that's, where they have to dig in a little bit deeper and do a little bit more preliminary analysis to determine, what the correct course of action is going to be. And I would just add another thing is like giving people options. And again, the author talks about optionality in the book, and I don't know if we're going to get to that later, but I really appreciated his viewpoint on that, where it's an option and not necessarily an obligation. Giving somebody a choice and allowing them to kind of even guide themselves, and maybe one, it's the option isn't to do it or not to do it, but like you can choose, this really complex one or this mildly complex one, to get them to progress on their own.
So Tim, what I hear us talking about is exposure therapy in the long run for the leaders listening out there. It's whether or not it's them getting more to prepare them for their next role, or whether it's them giving their employees more. Little stressors at a time. We do things like inspections. We do pre-inspections. Pre-inspection is a stressor for the unit. But guess what? It's giving them a free look at something that's not included in our normal inspection. So it's just like those little things. You watch enough scary movies, eventually you're not going to be as scared the next scary movie that comes out. You start getting desensitized with it. And I look at it as like the stressors. The more stressors you have, the not in a bad way, the less resilient you have to be, because now you're able to intake all of that, action it, and move forward.
So I'm glad that you brought up stressors, because in the book, they talk about black swan events. So for anyone who doesn't know what a black swan event is, it's an unpredicted, unprecedented event that nobody could predict coming. And what we as people like to do is we like to take the previous black swan events and we like to study them, analyze them, and then predict what the next one is going to be. And historically, we have always been wrong, because you cannot predict a black swan event. It's just impossible. So what are some potential black swan events that we talked about? We've talked about, the 1920 Spanish influenza, COVID-19, stock market crashes, bank collapse, housing market collapses. And in the book, he talks about how we always take the last black swan event and then we kind of take a look at that and go, well, that is the worst it's ever was. That's the worst it's ever going to be. And so we got to prepare for that worst eventuality. And then the next thing that comes along is way worse than the previous one. And then everyone kind of freaks out again and doesn't, prepare well for it. And he offers up that if we're anti-fragile, though, we don't have to prepare for it and be resilient through it. We can actually get better through the event because we're living organisms and we develop and we grow through it. So tying that in with options into procrastination as well, because I know I did all of you a really good favor of asking you a week ago to read a 500-page book and then come talk about it a week later. And you guys did it, but you didn't procrastinate on it because the bear was chasing you. So what is your standpoint and take on how do we prepare people for black swan events, and your take on procrastination? Do you agree or do you disagree?
I'm a professional procrastinator. And I was like, but I do some of my best work at the very end, right? Because the bear is chasing me and I have to be prepared and I have to perform or execute whatever that task is. And I think it's all about providing folks, again, the necessary tools in order to be successful. So it's okay if whatever that black swan event knocks me down, I just have to survive it, and then I can come back bigger and better from it. But the thing, you can't procrastinate on some of those tools, like providing somebody those tools. So again, I like to use the term delicate balance all the time, because it's, ensuring that you provide folks those tools in order for them to overcome whatever that stressor is. For them to survive it. And then so that way they can reflect on it to make themselves stronger for the next event.
I'd have to go to say that this is where I think I sided on the side of the fragile, because it's hard to go through a black swan event. COVID-19 was hard to go through. And it's hard to put yourself in the mindset to think, okay, I'm going to go through this. I'm gonna develop a plan to get through it, but I'm gonna be better on the other side of it while you're going through. It's really easy to look back on these black swan events. So I think I'm more of I'd rather go through it and not try to plan all the things before the event happens. So I can understand what you said. It's really hard or next to impossible to work through those or plan those. But oh, that's hard. That takes a lot of forethought and planning. So
I think there's a lot of expectation attached to all this, right? We have some concept that if we, whatever, go to sleep early and wake up early and brush our teeth, it's gonna be okay. But I think I know with my job, my expectation is I don't know what I'm walking into. I don't know what's going to happen. I think I have a plan, but it doesn't work out. And I think that there's something to having an expectation that there is going to be another one, as difficult as COVID was, and everybody being home, and children, disconnected from social, emotional experiences, and learning on the computer and all those kind of things. There's going to be more, and it's going to be weird, and it's going to be, who knows what. And that there needs to be some kind of openness for I don't know, but something's coming. I just need to be in a place where I can accept whatever that is, whatever the next black swan is. I need not to be, fearful or, running the other direction, right? I need to kind of face this storm head on and kind of go towards it, instead of hunkering down and running the other way and saying, well, how do we do it? I don't know. When something comes up, we always do it this way. Why did we always do it that way? I don't know, because that was what they did before, that kind of mentality. Just kind of say, all right, let's go after it.
So what about when it comes to, you made a great point with the expectations that it's going to happen again. What about the other expectation of it's going to be worse than it was before, and how do I survive it?
Well, that's the perspective, right? Relatively speaking, the next one's going to be worse. But there's nothing to say that it will or won't be, or that it has or it hasn't. It's about your perspective. Growing up, my father was active in the war veterans organization, and there would be, a bunch of guys who looked like just kind of, overweight middle-aged men, but, they rose to the occasion, right? There would be guys with their little, envelope caps on their head, and they'd have their wings on there with little stars. And, that means they jumped into combat. And I'm looking at these guys like, what? But they kind of rose to whatever it was, right? Nobody expected they were going to have to jump out of a perfectly good airplane with a not so easy to adjust parachute and, go fight the enemy and do those kind of things. We just don't know. And is it worse? Well, it's worse because I'm in it, but is it worse than the last time? depends on, are you looking forward? Are you looking backward? Did you come from another one? That kind of thing.
So I just want to jump to the chat real quick. So Jeremy said COVID is a good example of the convergence of resilience and anti-fragility. Resilient people or organizations toughed it out. Anti-fragile did as well, but developed strategies to thrive through it. And I think that's a great point, Jeremy. So thank you for jumping in the chat and thank you for adding to the conversation. So if anybody else is out there watching and wants to contribute and add something to the show, that's why we're here. So we can all talk. If you have any questions for the panel, put them in the chat and we'll go ahead and get to that point as well. And I'll read through them as they pop in. So I think rising to the occasion, Sue, like you said, is incredibly important, that people need to understand that, there's going to be a generation of people out there that are going to be asked to do things that majority of the population would say they're incapable or unwilling to do. But I agree with you that they will rise to the occasion no matter what, because that's what needs to be done. And that kind of leads us to the procrastination part of this. Because I know, Pam, you said you are a master, procrastinator. But again, Taleb says that procrastination is not a bad thing, that it's actually a choice, that we have options. Like I can either do things right now, or I can wait to do them when they really need to get done. Does it have to be done now? And that stressor of time is approaching and I need to get it done kind of burns a fire within us to like, oh, okay, I'm either going to be extinct or I got to get this thing done. I don't want to be extinct, so let me get it done. So what are your thoughts on procrastination? Is it an option? Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? I know my 20-year-old son would say it's an amazing thing, but what do y'all think?
So since I'm a self-professed professional procrastinator, I I used to think, honestly, until I heard his opinions and views on procrastination, I used to view it as a bad thing, that I was causing myself this undue stress and anxiety. But then when he said if procrastination isn't something that needs to be fixed because sometimes it resolves itself. And, if history has taught me anything, that again, I do some of my best work under such immense pressure, because it is at that point almost like a sink or swim. And failure, for me it's not an option. And there's professional embarrassment, and I don't want to endure those things. So I'm going to overcome it and I'm just going to do it. And so again, I kind of agree with him. Procrastination doesn't have to be a bad thing, and it's not something that necessarily needs to be fixed.
I look at procrastination as an individual choice. Because in order to get to the point of procrastination, you have to already let go of the choice of knowing that you can do it right now. You're making a decision to say, I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to push it off, or for whatever other stressors or whatever other things on your life. But I agree with Pam that procrastination, which is a mini crisis, depending on the level of what's needed, it helps build you. It gives you more growth. It allows you to take an action or whatever it is you're doing, produce a better product, which is subjective to the individual receiving the product, because we hope on the other end, it's as good of a project or a product as it would have been if I took my time and did it a week ago. So I'm a firm believer, and I don't think procrastination is a bad thing. I think it has its benefits at certain times, but procrastination can also, on the other hand, lead to failure, because if you procrastinate too much and the project is too big, the results can not be in your favor. So that's my point.
So no, I agree. It depends on the size of the project, right? That also leads to the level of procrastination, is like in how terribly I judge how much time I really need to complete a project. But the author, Talib, he says in there that I think he takes his procrastination about a back injury, and how he just kept putting it off and putting it off, and then it just kind of resolved itself. And so again, there's some goodness from that in some scenarios, not all. It's not a one size fits all kind of thing. But again, it's just like procrastination, I try to give it to myself in moderation.
See, as you're talking, Pam, what it sounds like, if I had to put words to it, and we know words are very like powerful and important, I would almost hear what you're saying in my head. The words flow through the air, go in my ear, the universal translator, and I hear more of I delay things. That there is some sort of whatever mechanism in your own self that's just delaying the process that you're going to do, whether you did it 2 weeks before or 2 days before, but that your focus is on the quality product. When I think about procrastination, I think of more of like the freshman year in college, so to speak, right? And there'd always be somebody who wouldn't do whatever it is, and they'd be, looking at the big, bathtub with the ice and the natty lights in there, waiting for them to chill. But the procrastination of doing the project would be, they put it off, and then they just kind of blasted through it, brain salad on the paper. So I kind of hear this. I sort of hear a difference in the way you procrastinate.
I experience both.
Was
But you're
was it
absolutely right.
Was it that visual with the bathtub and the beers?
It was, yeah. So many things I do just delay, but there are some things. I would say in my professional life, I delay things. In my personal life, I procrastinate, if you will.
So the great thing about procrastination is it can lead to volatility. And I think we've kind of discussed that here a little bit, is whether I'm going to delay it with the natty lights and the ice bath. However, you can also put some water, stick it in the fridge. It'll be like 5 minutes. You're good. Or you can your delay and actually procrastinating will lead to some volatility and some change. And when it comes to mental health, and I really want to talk about that for the last 10 minutes, because we're here talking about anti-fragility as it relates to mental health and our lives, but it's also Suicide Awareness Month. And I want to make sure that we're spending the last couple of minutes focused on how fragility in mental health and over reliance on stability, like how that causes problems, or does it cause problems, or do we need to encourage people to embrace volatility and uncertainty for long-term benefits? So I'm not quite sure if that made sense, but like let's explore those two topics of fragility and mental health and over reliance on stability, on how those two things can cause issues with each other.
So I'm gonna jump in before you give your professional, because I know you have a lot more information on this. But in my mind, I think relying on stability too much can make individuals or us unprepared for shock of things that come out. In mental health, in all walks of life, I mean, a little uncertainty and unpredictableness allows us to move forward. I think it also can, maybe when that person or someone is needing a little bit more help, can prepare them how to handle a situation. Because some people think small situations are so big that it can't be overcome. And when you talk about suicide, I saw a story where a kid did some calls and futures, and thought he lost his parents' life savings. Come to find out the next day he hadn't, but he decided to end his life. So I think all these situations of that prepare us for all these shocks, these things that we can't account for, but we don't be resilient. We open up to other aspects. Can help for preparation of preparing us to make better decisions.
So I want to add again before Sue, the professional here on on mental health. So it just really occurred to me. So the military acronym VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. That is one of the things, or a strategy that the U.S. military uses whenever they're preparing and planning for conflict. And maybe we can use a little bit more of that mentality in our personal lives or in the corporate world. Just going to throw that out there.
Sue, what do you think?
So, so suicide is a big problem, right? We know that, and it's an especially big problem in the military. And there's no difference. Actually, the Guard has higher rates of suicide when you look at those statistics than active duty, right? And, I get called in to do assessments, right? Somebody's danger, on the ledge, gonna jump, and instead of focusing on the death part, I focus on the pain, right? I don't say, why do you want to kill yourself? Why would death be better? What do you, I say, things related to the struggle, the pain, what it obviously this is hurting you, I understand this is just terribly painful, but let's look at that. Let's look at those things. And kind of like you said, Chris, there are no big problems, right? They really aren't. They're all small problems that haven't been addressed for whatever reason, and now they take on this look, this persona, this view that they are now insurmountable and big, and now there's that struggle, and I always attribute that to the pain, right? And a lot of times it's not taking away the pain. It's getting the person to see that painful feeling, that painful situation, the aspects of it may change, right? So if I draw on my invisible whiteboard in the air, right, and we have the time, the time in the pain scale, sometimes that pain will go up, right? The ideations will be more pronounced. Well, sometimes they'll go down, there'll be solutions, the pain will lessen, you'll make connections, there'll be some kind of growth from whatever it might be, a growth from the trauma, and sometimes it just stays the same. And that is really the thing that kind of I want to put the finger on, right? The ability to tolerate that stress, to tolerate that anxiety, and to not look for something that is going to take it away, whether it's a magic pill or a magic person or a magic spell, but that that anxiety or that stressor, the real key, the behavioral health intervention is really about how do I see that, accept that, and take steps to live with it, deal with it, move with the thoughts, the aspects, the actual pain, the actual what I am going through. And that's really where the change kind of comes in, that understanding of it hurts. Sometimes it's going to hurt more than other times. And sometimes it may just continue to hurt, but that ending it doesn't end anything, right? Killing yourself doesn't accomplish anything that is really going to address it. It's here, and sometimes when you feel anxious, the cure is not Xanax, a benzodiazepine or Klonopin or some kind of, SSRI, some medication. It's to feel the anxiety, right? Breathe, and move forward.
So you bring up a great point, and there's a very powerful quote in the book, and I love it. It's my favorite quote of the book, where Taleb says, "Learn to love the wind." And he equates that to the same wind that will blow out a candle is the same wind that ignites a campfire, that makes a brush fire or bonfire burn brighter. And when you talk about, you got to feel the anxiety and feel it, breathe through it, work through it. It's not about a magic pill. It's not about anything else. I love the metaphor of learning to love the wind, because there's going to be a struggle. There's going to be a pain point, like you said, and it's all small comparative to where you identify yourselves. Are you the candle, or are you the bonfire? Right. And I don't know how many of you know the song, like "This Little Light of Mine, I'm gonna let it shine." Right. I love that song. And when I read this part, I was like, you know what? That's absolutely true. Like, I would love to have some problems, not a lot of problems, right? Some problems come in and make me thrive and be better and light a fire versus blow out my candle. And so, if you're out there and you're watching this and you're thinking about suicide, I would say go to militaryOneSource.com if you're a veteran. There's tons of resources for you there. If you're in the National Guard, the Connecticut National Guard, you can reach out to Susan Tobenkin, Sue, and she can definitely help
Could I
you
just
out there. Yeah, absolutely.
could
Go
I
ahead.
just plug? So we have toll free a line, and it's 855-800-0120. And that's myself or one of my team. It's not a call center. It's not a push 1, push 7. We'll connect you with somebody. You're actually speaking to a licensed Army vetted clinician who will dialogue with you. And that's all the time, every day. It's not just a weekend kind of thing. So shameless plug for the National Guard Behavioral Health Care Line.
No, absolutely. And I'm going to put all those in the post production of this live into the show notes so that people know where they can reach out and get help if they need help. And then also, if you need to reach out and talk to somebody, that will be there as well too. And as I was thinking about this topic and how to approach it, because it can get pretty dark pretty quick, and then that doesn't make it any better for anybody either. I really loved framing this book in this context, really with learning to love the wind, learning to embrace that and not let it blow out your candle. So, Sue, Pam, Chris, I really appreciate your time. I know all of you are incredibly busy. Thank you for doing this live lunch and learn. We're going to do a couple more here in the future. And for everybody watching, go ahead and jump in the chat and say thank you to the panel as well. Thank you so much for taking your time and your energy. And maybe we'll do another one here shortly.
Thank you for setting it all up, Tim. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes.
Good
Thank
to
you.
meet
Thank you,
guys.
Tim.